Hello, it's great to have you on our webinar today. Today, we're going to talk through some different tips you can use to successfully onboard as a product manager. Product managers come from very unique backgrounds. Some can stem from software engineering that transitioned into product. You could be a scientist, or you can even be on the business or finance side, and you wanted to get more into the product and drive product vision. The tips I'll talk through today really can be applied regardless of your background, as well as regardless to the actual position you are transitioning into, whether you're an intro level product individual as an associate or all the way through towards a product director. A bit about me, I started off my career in consulting, optimizing, kind of looking at the revenue cycle of hospitals, so very much on the business side of hospitals, looking at how they can increase their revenue and optimize their processes. Through that, I kind of stayed within revenue cycle and moved into a project management role focused on patient collections. I implemented technology into both hospitals as well as collection agencies to both monitor the collections as well as optimize that process, looking at really who to go after and when and how often for the hospital to get the most money out of their patients. Again, all on that revenue cycle side of hospitals that not everyone thinks about day to day. As I was working within project management, I got really intrigued by the kind of end users or the clients that I was talking to and wanted to start getting involved more about product direction and how can we build something that really fits a kind of user need. I transitioned into product as I moved into my role within the Broad Institute, where I helped develop and build out the platform for scientific research that started within the Broad. The platform, originally called FireCloud, now it's called Terra, is used for scalable scientific or biomedical research. And it was really there that I started learning about product processes, got exposed to Agile, looking at how to use OKRs for planning and how to work collaboratively within my product team, as well as with my engineers to understand how do we build the most best product that really meets our user needs, and how do we build it in the optimized way where really everyone is involved in that decision making and that building process. Thinking about my work as a product manager within the Broad, I decided that I really wanted to explore exposure to product work within a for-profit organization and really within a startup organization. So I moved from the Broad Institute to NIM, an Israeli startup company that automates medical coding. So I moved back to the revenue cycle here for a bit. And within NIM, I was the first US employee and really the only product person within the organization. I very much drove the product growth of our autonomous coding platform, entry into market, as with any startup, had a few different hats within sales and customer success as well. As with any kind of transition between a company, large differences in product between the Broad and NIM. And I'll talk about that a bit later and how to manage those differences in the onboarding. Recently, about 2 months ago, I transitioned to Microsoft. Here, I lead the growth of our genomics platform. Within this transition, again, quite different in product from the Broad as well as NIM, and I'll talk about again how to transition into a new organization and a new kind of product process orientation successfully. But from the personal side, I grew up in Oregon, lived in Boston for many years, but actually the last 2 years was based out of Israel, working with that startup NIM. And now I'll be moving back to the West Coast in a few months as I move into my role within Microsoft. And I love hiking, so very excited to move back out here. Starting a new position is exciting and challenging. You often find yourself on the first day or even a few days before, staring up at this learning curve, this onboarding curve that you experience. can be a bit daunting. There's that intellectual learning curve where you have to understand both the company's processes, a new product, sometimes even a new domain or a new area. If you're coming from product, say from product in kind of very much a tech or a back-end type company, moving to more of a life sciences product, you have to start understanding a whole different set of users in a whole different industry area. There's also that emotional curve, which is usually more of an up and down curve throughout the onboarding process. As you're excited about the position, encounter many challenges as always within onboarding. But at the end, kind of both of these curves lead towards the ultimate success within your role. Having a plan can really ensure a successful and less overwhelming onboarding process, such that you're not staring up at that learning curve in kind of a bit of fright, and more looking at it with anticipation and excitement, because you know exactly how you're going to tackle it and how you're going to climb up that mountain. So today I'm going to talk through 4 different kind of tips or areas that you can focus on in your onboarding process to really make it successful and reduce kind of that overwhelming feeling that you might have when you start a new position. The first one is understand your environment. So this can fall into 2 different categories. This first one is about the people. Really understand who you're working with. Most important, kind of learning the company culture to understand how you're actually going to begin working as a product individual, how you're going to be interacting with others. This one kind of hits really close to home for me. Kind of quick example of where I was at the Broad Institute working for a U.S. company, a nonprofit organization, about 5,000 or so individuals within the larger Broad Institute, but within the department I was in, about 100 or so. So not quite a large organization, but very much focused on kind of our goals, 2, 3 to 5, even to 10 years out of where we're headed with the product, and looking at quarterly OKRs or objective and key results in order to achieve that long-term vision. Moving to NIM, it was quite a culture shift on a few different aspects. One, from that product side, as a startup, very much focused more on the day-to-day, maybe week by week ahead. But I joined the company right when it was just about 10 individuals, really about a year and a half into the startup really timeline. And at that point, we're just trying to get day over and day and kind of really survive as a company. Definitely will not be thinking quarter by quarter, and definitely not beyond a few years out. You're really thinking of how can I get by day to day? How can I develop the product for it to succeed? Very much on that short term. And the other aspect is cultural. Whenever you enter into a new company, really understand that the culture is quite different, whether you're just moving kind of within a single country or even an international. So I moved to an Israeli startup company because I was one of kind of the first US employees. And as familiar as I was with the Israeli culture before I joined the startup, I was quite shocked to really start to understand and see the working culture of the Israelis in the company, which is very different than the American culture I was used to. Like I say, one of those was thinking about whether the company likes having long-term goals, right? In this case, not at that startup. And secondly, the way in the collaborative environment in which the company was focused, it was very much sitting next to your developers, next to your fellow coworkers, working together to solve a problem, something that I was a little less used to coming from the Broad. So understanding what this culture is, how the company and what the dynamics are, will really help you succeed and navigate the different aspects of your position. The other part to think about related to that culture is how the organization thinks about product management. So if you're coming from product and you're listening to this, you know that product in one organization, not necessarily the same as product in another organization. So really understanding, does leadership know what product is, or do they think about it as project management? Or do they use agile processes, or do they shy away from agile and use something else? Knowing what kind of their processes are and what they've used previously and what they use today really help you be successful and not step on toes or butt heads with kind of your different coworkers or with leadership, but also make you successful because you're coming into an organization that's ready to try different processes and come to one that works well for them. The next one is kind of identify your points of contact. When you come into any new group, not only is understanding the culture and kind of that environment important, but also knowing who do you talk to? How do you navigate this organization? How do you navigate your team? And this is both within kind of your product, but also within your position and your own personal growth. And just identifying those people up front is really useful. So if you have a challenge, you know who to go to in order to help solve it. These first kind of 30 days or so as you meet the people, it's really a good opportunity for you to start building relationships. I know now in kind of the virtual world, it's challenging kind of to meet everyone. It's slightly a different environment, but I definitely encourage you to have virtual coffee, virtual lunch, or even virtual walks just to meet your different coworkers, whether you're interacting with them on a day-to-day basis, just to better understand where they come from, so you know more about that community. The second aspect of understanding your environment is learning your product. This is really where you as a product individual is coming in and going to have a huge impact. This is what you're going to own. Understand the product, the inside and out, really kind of what product are you working on, what's its vision, the users, competitive landscape, current pain points. Now, within any organization, they can be at different levels of understanding of each of these items. You could be coming in and develop a product from scratch. Then, of course, you're going to define each one of these and have to do research in order to get to your answers on all of them. Or sometimes it's a very mature organization and these are all defined already and you're coming in to help grow the product further. So here, look for documentation if it exists on each one of these components. Or if it doesn't exist, a good exercise, actually, my coworker at Microsoft told me recently, is just begin writing your own documentation. That'll help you not only learn the product, but also create clarity for your team at the same time. So a win-win scenario. And lastly, within learning your product, determine your product's role within the larger ecosystem. So if it's just kind of a startup, you have one product, it still has a role and importance to leadership, maybe to stakeholders or investors. Or if it's a product within a large organization, so like Microsoft, we have many products here. Understanding where your product fits in with all the other products really help you understand how to drive that product to success in the future. The second tip is building a plan. This one is really you can start and you should start as soon as possible. Even before you begin your first day within your new position, I really recommend thinking about what's your plan? What's your personal plan? What's the plan for the product? How are you going to enter into this organization? What are you planning to achieve? Now, I will say sometimes your plan is not going to be 100% accurate, even if you know the environment that you're going into, but it can be between 60, 80% accurate even before you begin your position. Having this plan will help you feel grounded and know what your first or second or even third steps are once you step into the new position. Along with having this plan, and then of course iterating on it, is build your narrative. Within every kind of level of the organization, you always speak or give your narrative slightly differently, right? Kind of depending on who you're talking to. If you're speaking with developers, the narrative on what you're trying to accomplish and the level of detail you provide is much different if you're speaking to the executive level. So just make sure that when you connect with each individual within your organization, you have the right narrative for what you are trying to accomplish with this product or with your role here, and kind of alter it depending on who you're talking to, so it's the right level for that individual. Along with the plan, define what you're really trying to achieve. What are your goals? And then figure out how you're going to get there. Again, as I mentioned previously, this might just be 70, 80% accurate, and you're going to iterate on it constantly, as we're very familiar in product iteration is a key component of it. But at least have that written out. And so you can make that visible and start getting feedback from either your manager or your colleagues to make sure that's the right plan, if there's any modifications to it, if it's even feasible to get there. And along with that plan and connecting with the coworkers on how to achieve it, figure out the people you need in order to achieve those goals. When you come into an organization, there may just be you and one other person if you're really starting at a startup, or there could be a much wider team that you have available. Figure out if the plan that you have and the goals you're trying to achieve can be achieved with just those individuals, or if you need other expertise or a different personnel to come into the team in order for you to achieve those goals. So really think about your people and what kind of team you need to build up around you in order for you to achieve what you're looking to get to. One example I'm actually going to take away from the sales side is you come in and you say are a product individual at the startup. You begin and have a sales hat, a customer success hat, like I had at NIM, and you are building out this kind of product facing voice of what are the main items that customers are looking for. At a certain point, you start realizing, and as I did with NIM, that you really can't complete and do all the sales that a startup needs. So we started hiring a sales team to take that hat away from product and move it to kind of the sales side to help really support and bring in the customers. That me from the product side, I could still kind of move back to focus on product, and I no longer needed to have all those hats as you would when you immediately start in a very early stage startup. And lastly, distinguish between quick wins and long-term efforts. So this you may have heard before of kind of 30, 60, 90-day thought process of what you want to achieve at each stage. You want to rack up quick wins at the beginning, really kind of show your value to the organization. And when you think about the plan, try and identify items that you can achieve quickly and effectively, but also ones that you need to achieve longer term, and you'll have a plan to get there because there are differences and making sure that you really focus on the short-term wins while also simultaneously planning for those long-term goals is really important. The third tip is be ready to bootstrap. Regardless of the organization you go into, whether it's just a startup, whether it's a large organization, or kind of in the middle, don't assume that everything is in place with all the correct resources assigned. It might be a bit chaotic, some companies more chaotic than others, but sometimes you have to wear multiple hats and get things done quickly by yourself to succeed. Coming from different backgrounds, I know everyone has different skill sets, but use those skill sets and see how you can provide value and how you can achieve your goals. And like I said, if it's for you jumping into other roles slightly or doing other tasks that maybe an admin should complete, or a sales team, or customer success, or even engineer, if you need to jump in at the beginning to really kind of get those items organized and get your plan developed, it's okay to wear multiple hats and kind of help create clarity in the sometimes chaotic space that you may be going into. Now, the other item here is on documentation. As I mentioned, if there is no documentation, even if typically a technical writer would put the documentation together, start putting some together, really kind of seeing how you can add value to the pain points within the organization and get that clarity needed for you to succeed as a product individual within that group. The other benefit of putting that documentation together is you'll learn the product at the same time. So it definitely helps both your teammates as well as yourself. And lastly, remember who you are. Also, be confident in your skill set. You were hired in order to meet a need within the organization, and you have the right skill set for it. So really be confident in your background, be confident in what you're going to learn to really kind of express that you know where you are within the organization and you know what you're trying to achieve. So have that reflect on others. And leverage core product principles and processes. At the end of the day, no matter how chaotic an organization is, no matter how overwhelming going into this new position may be, always think back to the product processes that you're familiar with and know, because those really are true no matter kind of what area of industry or what type of product you're working on. And that's creating a vision and requirements for your team, creating that clarity of how to move forward. It's asking the why of why we're building this and think critically about that product to try and ensure that the value is the correct value and whether we should be building something else instead. And of course, the famous one within product is that saying no is a powerful word. Don't kind of be hesitate to say no, even within you as a new individual within the organization. You should definitely feel comfortable saying no to kind of new features or new areas, new architecture for a product. Be decisive and drive decisions with data. Again, core product processes that will follow you within any product role that you go into. Make sure that you're very decisive in kind of what you want within the product and what you're trying to achieve. And make sure it's backed up with data so that you can communicate those decisions to leadership and get buy-in. And lastly, tell a story. That's your role as a product manager. Tell a story of your product, tell a story of your users. Make it exciting for why you're building this product and what's the impact it's going to have. I want to leave you with a quote by Steve Sims, the author of Blue Fishing. If you're interested in a good book to read. Don't understand the power of simplicity. Don't be easy to understand, be impossible to misunderstand. Product managers at their core, our focus, what we really need to do day in and day out is communicate. We communicate throughout the entire spectrum of the organization. Developers, managers, leadership, stakeholders, clients. We need to communicate with each one of those successfully in order to do our role to the utmost success possible. In all the conversations that you have, and as you think about your first few days, weeks, months within the position, as you identify the people to talk to and the vision for your product, think about how you're communicating with individuals and critically think each day, is this the best method of my communication? Am I getting my point across? Because this really will determine ultimately the success of your role is can you communicate effectively with those around you? So whether you're starting a kind of transitioning into a new product role, starting product in your first product role, or going into a leadership role, transitioning soon in a few months, or kind of not transitioning for maybe a few years as you switch jobs. I wish you best of luck and really think about these tips to help you stand at that bottom of that learning curve, both emotionally and intellectually, and think about how these tips can really help you feel more ready to tackle that new position and be successful at it.